Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Office Hours with the Professor. As always, I'm your host, William the Professor Collis, and I'm super excited to get into this week's podcast. So what are we going to talk about? The Halo World Championships. But it's actually not the World Championships of Halo themselves that I want to discuss. It's the event calendar taking place after the World Championships. So what do I mean? Well, the next season of Halo resumes in February 2023, but there's time between then and now. And so what's been announced is that two teams, Optic and Space Station, are going to host events in December and January to essentially bridge the content gap. And I thought this was an interesting enough sort of announcement. It was worth digging into a little bit because this is kind of a cool model for publishers and teams to interact with around esports. So what do I mean? Why is this interesting? Well, if you think about it from a publisher perspective, it's extremely difficult to fill like every month of every year, every week, right? With like esports content, it's just really, really hard. And there are going to be natural breaks in the season to basically allow for downtime, to do setup and planning and other things. You need breaks in a competitive calendar. And what's interesting about this is by giving events to partner teams, and I should say both Optic and Space Station are partnered with Halo Infinite, it's not only a way of filling the calendar at lower cost, it's also a way of offloading events to other partners. It's actually a pretty big benefit to teams because they're able to develop their own brands more, have more control over the viewership, and get credit for engaging fans with these custom events. So I think this is sort of basically a clever win-win scenario for publishers and teams to sort of work together to create a year-round content calendar. But I also think this story is more interesting than just that insight because there's sort of a hidden benefit to what's being done here. And it pertains specifically to the Space Station event. The Space Station event is going to feature the Forge. For those of you who don't know what Forge is in Halo, we won't go into it. But essentially, it's going to allow, presumably, new types of gameplay, new maps, new something to be piloted in a competitive environment. And this is another hidden benefit to sort of farming out these events to teams. It allows for sort of lower risk innovation, right? The publisher can't build their marquee league around sort of random different ideas of new things to try in the game. They sort of have to produce a relatively staid traditional competitive calendar. But these partnered events can test different ways to play the game and new features. And if they're successful, the publishers will learn about them at low risk and can look to build them in to the actual mainline event calendar. So I think that's another sort of hidden benefit to this model that makes it interesting and fun. So overall, I give this story an A-. Maybe because it's not the most glamorous story overall, but I really like to see these, good relationships between publishers and teams to fill content calendars and solve problems in creative win-win ways. So again, A- for this story. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on this sort of, interesting approach to league team management. And I hope you'll join me next week for another episode of Office Hours.